Doctors of Reddit, what's the best asking for a friend story you've heard? One girl was interested in laxatives for a friend. She tried to learn everything about the dose, where what to buy, how to drink. She was brought in a week later with complete intestinal atony. She tried to lose weight so much and drank 2 or 3 tablets at a time. Oh, I have more stories like that, lol. I asked my doctor about AA for a friend of mine. Really? Years later the doctor still asks me how I'm doing with my sobriety. I've stopped trying to convince him I really was asking for a friend. A doc had a guy who just got out of jail a few days earlier came in with his GF who had signed in for an STD check. Walk in to meet them and he says casually, is it possible to get gonorrhea in your throat? At that moment I knew he had gonorrhea in his throat. Not a doctor but public health worker, kinda NSW, had an older man come into our clinic asking for a specific type of STD check. Guy's ex-wife was going around telling rumors that he was having sex with his goats, so was wanting to know if there was a way we could do a STD test that could prove if he hadn't had sex with any goats. Through this whole conversation, he just abruptly asks, so if someone was having sex with a goat, what STDs could they get? That dude is totally fricking his goats. Doesn't sound like a rumor to me. Not a doctor but pharmacist. Someone called the pharmacy one day, a young guy. I picked up, excuse me, how much does Viagra cost? Is there anything cheaper? I have someone that needs it. I explain everything and suddenly, will it work if I take it with alcohol? The guy began asking for someone else. At the end was for him and was asking just because he wanted his little one to work while drunk. Not mine but one of the older pharmacists I work with went out to help this 20-ish girl with some med questions. She then asked him about condoms and said, if you were to do me, what condom would you use? Yeah. He just walked away. All 12 of them, at the same time. My father is a doctor and he got a call once in the middle of the night from his call shared doctor's patient. The man asked what to do about a bump on his friend's arm that he scratched and something came out. He mentioned it was leaking a little oil now. It was as it. He scratched a pimple. Woke the whole family up at 3 AM because he had to page my dad over as it. How old was this man? Wife's dad is a urologist. When we first started dating, a friend of mine wanted her to ask if any of the penis enlargement pills were legit and actually worked. She went with the asking for a friend approach and he immediately assumed she was talking about me. Thanks babe. I briefly dated a doctor and she told me a few hilarious stories. 1. If my friend masturbated with someone else's vibrator, will she get an STD? 2. Can wearing a butt plug all day give you diarrhea? 3. If you have an ulcer and swallow a guy's CM, can you get pregnant? 2 out of 3 of these seem like somewhat legitimate questions. Lady walks in and goes, so if you cheated and got pregnant, but then had sex with your husband with a baby become his? It took everything in me not to laugh. Haha, I would have crapped myself laughing. Not a doctor, but I was an intern. I was in the OPD and this man from a different province came in and told me his friend has injected petroleum jelly in their member years ago and that now it's getting painful. Why yeah. He came back the next day and showed his lumpy member. This is a common thing apparently. Saw a patient who did the same, had to have his penis reconstructed. He told everyone it was worth it. I doctor here. Finally closed our offices to all but emergency care. Last year or so I had a staff member ask me for a friend if she got shot in the eye with CM and is now getting mild discharge. Is that okay? I looked at her eye and saw discharge. Went to the cabinet, gave a bottle of antibiotic to her for her friend and then went back to my patients. 2 days later I look at her and say, your eye is looking much better today. She says thanks. The discharge stopped a half day after using the drops. Not a doctor but I used to work next to AA pharmacy and my boss, a 55-year-old man, asked me to go buy him some condoms for his nephew. Alcoholics Anonymous Pharmacy. Studies have been done about the effects of THC on glaucoma. When I worked for a glaucoma specialist, we had a hippie type person come in with their family member for a new patient eval and ask the doctor to sign paperwork okaying a medical marijuana script for the patient's glaucoma. Problem was the patient was totally fine, didn't find any signs of the disease and his eye pressure was within normal limits, and the doctor did not appreciate having someone try to trick him. To piggyback off of this and because I'm tired of the questions, marijuana only lowers your eye pressures for max 4 hours. To have sustained effects you'd need to hit the blunt 6x a day and nearly 2,200 times a year. Take the dang eye drops. Another family medicine doc called in a doc yesterday on the cell phone asking what to do when you get soap in your eyes. Choose wisely folks. I mean it says so on the bottle. In case of contact with eyes, rinse thoroughly and contact a medical professional. Better safe than sorry. One of my besties called me late at night after his day party. He said someone who was staying the night wanted to have sex with his GF. They were drunk and a little uncoordinated, and somehow the frenulum, the little string thingy at the tip of the penis, ripped, and it won't stop bleeding. I gave his friend some general advice on stopping the bleeding and recommended a trip to the ER. The next day he asked me if I had any recommendations for urologists for his friend, because he needs minor surgery on his PP. I told him to cut the balls, and in response he sent me a pic of his injured penis. So, long story short, his wang got a remodeling and he is still with this vagina dentata sporting woman. I like that the friend was having sex with his girlfriend and he was still supportive enough to ask advice for the friend. There is one dream where in my dream, I'm Spider-Man, but I'm losing my powers. I'm climbing a wall but I keep falling. In my dream. Actually, it's not even my dream. It's a friend of mine's dream. You know, I'm something of a doctor myself. Not a doctor, but I saw this dude say to a doctor, "Can 2 white people have a black child?" Asking for a friend. The man's wife had an affair. That's rough. He must have had so many emotions running through his head. I wonder if the guy ever suspected anything before his wife gave birth. Yes, hi, this is Dr. X. I need to call in a prescription for hydroxychloroquine. Do you have any in stock? Asking for a friend. Divorced women cougars like to explain muscle strains as sex injuries to get a rise out of docs. Best way to deal is to stay monotone and not react. Patient describes proximal adductor muscle pain in hip flexion during recreational activity. Rated 7/10. Pain is now present during ambulation. If you don't react, they move along. Doesn't take long in the office to have seen and or heard everything. I'm not interested that you are recently divorced, started working out, and discovered Tinder. Good on you, but it takes more to get a rise out of me. One colleague in training had a professional cuddler with a similar injury. Doc was very conservative, possibly on the sheltered side, and in front of 2 of his superiors during the case, and she was not shy. I would add she was not visually what I assume most would hope for in a professional cuddler either. That one I enjoyed, on account of him, not her. Not a doctor. Heard this one from my cousin. A guy comes in and asks if it's possible to get a girl pregnant with someone else's sperm if guy A had sex with guy B before banging C female. Wish I knew the full story. Can't be sure, but my guess is that guy A had sex with guy B before banging C female. Not a doctor, but was mistaken for one by a drunk dude at a costume party once. Okay, twice. Sent him to sober up the first time, comes back 5 minutes later with no recollection of our first conversation and asks me for painkillers, and at which dose they kill you. I gave him the number for the suicide prevention hotline on a napkin and told him that they can help with the issue. He happily staggered away and I haven't heard from him since. Either he got help, or he didn't, but either way, it was a weird experience. So not me, but a person I saw. So the patient, sick as heck, staggers to the doctor and at the absolute loudest possible voice she said, "Are you single?" Betty wants to know. Betty was her childhood pet cow. The doctor calmly says, "I'm sorry, but I am not interested." We were all busting out laughing and I barely could breathe. I later asked the doctor how he kept a straight face. He said, "Laughing on the inside. It's a lot like crying on the inside." That is now the hospital I frequently visit. General practitioner here. One of my non-medical friends asks me that his friend wants to know a good home remedy for an STD. I told him a tablespoon of powdered detergent mixed in 1 glass of water should work. Next thing I know he's in my kitchen stirring a glass. Asking for my puppy. I took a class in medical parasitology. The professor, a PhD in parasitology, once had a very concerned neighbor bring him dog poop that had human pinworms in it. He suggested the neighbor take his puppy to the veterinarian for some albendazole and assured him that the infection would resolve. Pinworms are still a common and very treatable infection, even among first world children, but not puppies. I'm directly related to a nurse. More than once I've approached her with a question for a friend that actually was for a friend. Middle-aged women ordering a shitload of comfort food at our KFC drive-thru and then adding, sometimes multiple times, that it's not just for her. It's usually the contrary that happens to me. When I get food delivered and discover that they put cutlery for two in the bag. Nope, nope, nope. Everything's just for me. Not a doctor but a friend told me she asked her Gino if it was possible to hurt your stomach from swallowing too much jizz. When I was in med school, one of my classmates, who was always a bit unfocused, asked a psychiatry professor during a lecture if there was any research about cannabis and other drugs going on at our university, in case that group needed another PhD student. This classmate didn't graduate, as far as I know. I met him a while ago, and he looked like a stereotypical hippie, looked past me, not at me, and didn't recognize me even though we were in the same case group a bunch of times. Seems like he found his own way of researching drugs. Well, one time had a guy say what happens when you stick a tapeworm up your penis, and then he immediately followed with I'm asking for a friend. My thing was he was squirming a lot, so I had already assumed he was lying, so I told him he should go to the hospital to get it checked out, but I don't know if he did. It was very strange. Not necessarily asking for a friend, but my mom worked for a doctor in my hometown. He was a foreigner. I needed to see him one day and he begins telling me that not him, but his foreign French friends think Americans are stupid, lazy, fat etc etc. But he was saying it with a lot of oomph behind it, like he was disgusted. My cousin is always telling this story to my sister when she's drunk. The girl who came in asking if her friend washes his condoms after sex and reuses them, would they still be able to work? After a week the same girl comes in to ask my cousin to tell her boyfriend that the kid was his. Apparently this friend she was asking about was her boyfriend's close friend who she cheated with, and he got her pregnant after reusing condoms more than a few times to save money. Won't be saving money for condoms anymore, that's for sure. I just can't imagine being that cheap. Even if you need a special brand, it would have been less expensive than a paternity test or a baby. This person had legit medical questions but was too afraid to ask, so he created our AskReddit post hoping someone posted a similar question. In June of last year, a man who came into me about an ingrown toenail asked me if, hypothetical, you put a skittle up the hole of your penis, will it dissolve over time if it won't come back out? Asking for a friend. He says it doesn't hurt, it's just kind of uncomfortable when he gets a boner. I was part of a tattoo removal study. I asked the doctor what was the worst tattoo she ever saw. She said that there were some really bad ones, but the one that stuck in her head was the burly biker that got a no regrets tramp stamp in flamboyant calligraphy. She said she almost asked if it was consensual. Can putting a catfish in your rectum cause internal bleeding? Asking for a friend. And I didn't believe him until his friend came in and had 7 scars on his face just from trying to catch a knife while laying down. The reason I didn't believe my patient was asking for a friend was because he came into the hospital with an injury from falling off the roof while riding a skateboard inside a shopping cart. Not a doctor, but a patient. It was my first gyno appointment and the doctor was convinced that I wasn't a virgin, even added sorry. I just didn't try to correct him. Still a virgin. I wouldn't be seeing that doctor again. So inappropriate. One of my grandparents wasn't a nurse for like 30 years. She once had a young girl, like 18 or 19, come in asking for a friend of hers if she could still get pregnant if he used a condom but left the condom inside her afterwards. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.